Good afternoon. Today we are going to be talking about Chapter 13, which addresses the role of design in the new products development process. So the first point I want to make is that we have design and then we have design-driven innovation. And so the point here is that the role of design has developed to be one that can be so important that it actually drives the innovation or the success of a new product. We have such great design tools anymore, and there's so much creativity that's allowed in this area that the design of a product can actually create a new market, which is really something to think about. And so that elevates the role of design to be more important than it has historically been. And so we'll try to give it that level of respect in our conversation today, but do understand the difference between just design, which is just putting technology and an idea of a human need into the development of a product. So there's that, design, and then there's design-driven innovation, which is actually so creative and so special that it creates new markets. Okay, so Chapter 13, this is the meat. The meat of Chapter 13 is to cover the various potential roles that design can have in the development process. And so we'll go through each of these fairly briefly. Design can be important in creating a product that can be very quickly brought to market. Design can be important in creating a product that's easy to manufacture, and therefore you gain efficiencies in the production process and in being able to be reactive to the market, in being able to be more cost efficient in producing a product. So that's number two, design for ease of manufacture. Design for differentiation. This is going to be important in bringing a product to market that is distinct in the eyes of consumers from competitor products. Number four, design is very important in meeting customer needs. And so you'll see some terms in the textbook related to this role. It's important to have the user's, what's the right word? The user's eye in mind when you bring a product design into the development of a product. So what is the user wanting? And universal design is another term you'll see in the textbook where you're making a product that anybody can use. And so if you are trying to meet customer needs, these are concepts that are going to be important in that particular role. All right, so number five, design can be important in building a corporate identity for a product line. And so companies that are involved with developing the brand of a product, they want their products in that line to have a common feel or a common look to them, and so that users, consumers can look at different products in their line and immediately recognize that they're part of the same line. So the way you design products can be important in creating and maintaining that level of corporate identity. So that's number five. Finally, number six, this element here is has developed into one that's quite important in business and in being successful as a marketing company. Consumers want products that are kind to the environment. They want products that are green as far as their design. So they're not using a lot of plastics, for example. They're not using a lot of packaging that's excessive and doesn't need to be there. But also they want products that will be recyclable, or that once you're done with them, they're not just going to go into a landfill and damage the water supply and things like that. So understand those terms, design for disassembly and green design. So that's the final role of design covered in the textbook. All right, so design, when considering design, one has to think about how the product actually is put together. This is a fundamental capacity of design, that you are figuring out how to take the features of a product and put them together into the actual form of the product. And so there's 4 steps in this process. First, you're looking at the basic components of the product itself. So in this graphic here, we have components that relate to the recording system of this product, the components that relate to the disk drive, to the output system, and to the power source. So you've got all these different components. And then the next step in the design process is to chunk those together into groups that make sense for different functions of the product. And then once you have those chunks together, then you would arrange the chunks in a way that fits into the form factor of the product. And then you've got to have these different chunks being able to talk to one another as the product is actually functioning. And so you're making sure that the interface between the different chunks, that they work, and that the communication between the chunks works the way it needs to. So this is a conversation of product architecture and product platforms, and you'll see some relating here back to, I want to say it was chapter 2, where we talked about strategic product platforms and how important those can be for designing a product line, where you might take the subsystems of a car, for example, and use those subsystems across different cars in your product line. Well, this is how that actually happens, where you can take the functionality of the different components of the car's engine structure and put them together in a way where you can now just take that structure, you've built it, it works, and you can transfer it from one car product to another, and leverage that compatibility across products in your line. All right. Okay, so in Chapter 13, you'll see conversation about an industrial designer and also about a design engineer. So the industrial designer is the person in the process who is laying out the features that need to be accommodated in this product and actually putting style to those features and making sure that the different features work together to function in the way the product needs to function. So it's a technical role. It's also a creative role. And this person in this role has a number of, what's the right word? They have a number of considerations that they need to keep in the top of their mind. So they need to be sure that the interface with the user is a good quality experience for the user. So that's number one. They want to try to make an experience for the user that has some sort of an emotional appeal to the consumer. It's easy, it's enjoyable for the customer to use this product. And so they're looking to build that kind of appeal into their design. They want to make a product that's easy to maintain, and if it has to be repaired, that it's easy to repair. They want to make sure they're using that they're building a design that is appropriate with respect to the resources that go into that design. So using materials in the design that are cost efficient, that are available, things like that. And finally, they want to design a product that allows for differentiation from competitor products. So those are the 5 major considerations for an industrial designer to keep in mind. All right. So what happens now is you have the design function rolling out a prototype product based on the product protocol that has identified the target market and the benefits to be delivered by the product. Maybe you've gone through a house of quality effort to identify the specs that the product needs to have. And so now the industrial designer is taking all that information and has developed a prototype. And so that's not the end of the story, right? Because you may have 5 different prototypes, and somehow you have to decide which is the best one. Which of these prototypes works the best? Which do consumers like the best? Which one are we most capable of manufacturing? Which one of these prototypes are we going to take to market? And so there's a little bit of an iterative process here where a prototype is developed and it's put to the market, and the market gives feedback, and then you may come back and redesign your prototype. So this concept of focused prototype is a situation in particular where you'll see that multiple prototypes are kind of thrown out to the market, and to some extent you see what sticks, what customers really like. That's the idea behind a focused prototype. A comprehensive prototype is more of an in-depth development of a prototype that is what the company is going to kind of go with, and it's going to be less likely to be tweaked and tweaked and tweaked than a focused prototype would be. All right, so let's take a kind of a step back here and look at the process that we're going through when we're talking about design. So on the one end, we have a product protocol that delivers to us a set of needs that this product needs to deliver, and a set of considerations for each of the departments that are involved to be responsible for. And then on the other end, we've actually got a product now that that's been released to the market and we're selling it. And so in between there, you've got to come up with the functional design of the product, which then needs to be taken to the technical design level. And then we go further to look at the detail design of the product. And then finally, you got to figure out how to manufacture. What's the manufacture process need to look like? What's the design of that part of the process? And throughout all of that, we have this envelope design concept going on here. You'll see that in the textbook too. But this is the concept that all throughout the process you have marketing involved to keep their eye on the entire product, the augmented product concept that's going to be relating to all of the pieces that go with the core product itself. So warranty, packaging, instruction sets, service, all of those things need to be kind of developed along the way as the product itself is being taken through the prototype process and into the final release to the market. And so there's a lot of players in this process, and there's some strong personalities involved, and so you'll see some friction in the process between especially the industrial designer, who is more intent on putting form to the product to make sure it functions right, and the design engineer, who's looking more at the aesthetics or the way the product looks and feels. And so there can be friction there because they don't always, what the industrial designer is putting out, and he's working more on this end of the process, it's not necessarily going to mesh with the vision of the design engineer. So there has to be, a dovetailing at some point of the different considerations and opinions of those people along the way. And so throughout that, here you have marketing that's kind of working to smooth feathers between the different players involved and still be able to get their inputs, their contributions to the process, and keep their eye on the total product package along the way. And so, of course, also along the way, you've got customers' input that needs to be rolled into the process, and suppliers actually have a lot of good ideas too that you need to be able to leverage in the process. So it's not a simple job to oversee this effort, and it does require quite a lot of management skill, which will generally fall on the shoulders of the product manager, who's going to be a marketing person. So you and me, so us, yeah. All right, so add to all of that complexity, you may have people working on your team, your product development team, that are all over the place. And so somehow it's important to put these people together so that all these points of friction can be worked out. So you either physically put them together with co-location, or you try to connect them digitally through the internet and through, Skype sorts of products, or some way to get people that can communicate with one another in some sort of a relative face-to-face fashion. You may have global teams. That makes it even more complicated. Some companies are trying so hard to smooth out the points of friction in this that they'll actually bring in a producibility engineer, which that function is more involved with the manufacturing side of the design process, but also understands the industrial designer and the design engineer roles in the process too. And so you may be dealing with that sort of a player in this process. There's lots of developments in the technology capabilities that will feed this this effort. So computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturing, computer-aided engineering, design for manufacturing, so forth. All of these different sorts of systems may be ones that you're having to deal with in the process as well. And finally, rapid prototyping. There's technology that is now involved with the design phase that allows companies to bring a prototype to existence very, very quickly, where it maybe used to take months. Now they can do it in a matter of days. And so as a product manager, you will be dealing with a lot of technology in the process that feeds the design stage of the product development process. Your challenge throughout all of that is to keep the voice of the customer in the middle of it, and so that you will, in the end, develop a product that is what customers want and that does solve a need that customers are experiencing or having a trouble with that they need to have some resolution to. All right, so with that, we'll end for Chapter 13, and I hope you all have a great rest of your week. We will see you next time with Chapter 15. Bye.